Welcome back to part 2 of my read-through of the Batman the Animated Series Writer's Bible. If you haven't watched part 1 yet, well, you probably should. But I went through the first 40 or so pages looking at the city of Gotham itself, and this beautiful drawing there, and the descriptions for many of the heroic characters. So we can see Bruce Wayne, the original design for Robin, some Alfred here. Commissioner Gordon here had an extensive backstory that was never shown in the TV show. Same with Montoya and Harry Bullock. Harvey Bullock is his name, but anyway. Yeah, so for part 2, I'm going to be talking about the villains. So let's take it away from page 43 here. With the exception of the Joker, Penguin and Catwoman, each time we initially meet a Batman villain, it will be Batman's first encounter with them as well. Some of these adversaries will appear in more than one adventure, while others will be defeated and locked away in Arkham Asylum or Stonegate Island Penitentiary, surrounded by the icy waters of Gotham Harbour. Now, the reason for this is that the Joker, Penguin and Catwoman had been in the movies in the early 90s. So audiences would already be familiar with them, and I gather that Warner Brothers executives were quite adamant that they should synergize with the Tim Burton movies by using the same character designs, or at least similar character designs. Many of the villains faced by Batman will combine an eccentric, outrageous sense of criminal fun with deadly efficiency. After all, if they're going to give a character as extreme as Batman a run for his money, they'll have to be pretty extreme themselves. Such villains will include original characters, as well as those from the comic pages, such as the Riddler, Man-Bat, Scarecrow, Mad Hatter, Ra's al Ghul, Clayface, Hugo Strange, and Boss Thorn. So far, so accurate. Although they've misspelled Ra's al Ghul's name and they put a space in Clayface, and Boss Thorn, well, yeah, Man-Bat I think should be hyphenated as well. Oh, I'm being so pedantic. Forgive me, I might cut that out. Although there is a temptation for every episode to be about a villain's attempt to set a trap for Batman, we offer a word of caution and encourage storylines that stress pursuit of criminals and their activities instead of simple bat-trap stories. Although some of these stories are necessary and desired, we don't want to run into the problem that the TV series faced, where the only thing more outlandish than the traps was the improbable way the hero escaped. Yeah, I'd say that actually rang fairly true for the animated series still. Although we insist that our writers put some thought into the internal logic of the villain's actions, specifically what does the villain want and what do they plan to do with it when they get it. Although greed is a good motivation, the more thought we put into the manifestation of this greed, and the more satisfying it will be. Beyond greed, the motive and plan of the villain should be made clear so we have a sense of where the story is going and what Batman must thwart in order to emerge victorious. The same goes for those stories which are mysteries. We have to know what Batman is wondering if we're to care about his discovery. Broadly, yes, that's still pretty accurate. And I'm finding with this Bible that a lot of like the broad concepts remain the same. It's the specific details about the characters that are perhaps a bit different. So let's move on to the first villain they describe, and that is the Joker. Taking first place in Batman's rogues gallery is the malevolent clown prince of crime, the Joker. Originally an ambitious criminal with a twisted sense of humour, the man who was to become the Joker first encountered Batman during a botched robbery at the Monarch Card Factory. Terrified by the Dark Knight's ominous appearance, the would-be robber escaped by leaping into a drainage vat of chemical waste, which carried him into the river. After dragging himself to the shore, the criminal made a horrifying discovery. The toxins in the vat had dyed his hair bright green, bleached his skin chalk white, and stretched his now permanent red-rimmed lips up into a hideous grin. This gruesome, permanent transformation snapped the crook's already unstable mind, and he vowed to use his bizarre looks to terrify honest people the same way Batman used his costume to strike fear into criminals. Thus was born the malevolent mountebank known only as the Joker. Okay, so this is broadly in line with what they touch upon in, what episode was it? It was in New Batman Adventures, Beware the Creeper, I think it's called, where they have Jack Ryder at the Ace Chemical Factory saying, on this night, 12 years ago, or whatever it was. So yeah, broadly, yes, but they don't really delve into the Joker's origins properly in the show, so It doesn't contradict anything anyway, apart from, the saying it's the Monarch card factory or whatever it was, because it was Ace Chemicals in the show, I believe. Despite his clownish appearance, the Joker is the most dangerous of Batman's enemies. His arsenal includes lethal, gag-inspired weapons like electrocuting joy buzzers, acid-squirting flowers, and exploding whoopee cushions, as well as his most fearsome creation, Joker Venom. Yes. Sprayed in a fine mist, this chemical induces wild laughing fits followed by temporary paralysis. A stronger dose causes instant death, with the victim's face pulled into a copy of the Joker's hideous, rictus grin. Now this was definitely the intention, but I believe broadcast standards and practices wouldn't allow the Joker to actually kill anyone. So what tended to happen, at least in Batman the Animated Series, is that the victims would be sent into a frenzy laughing, with their eyes bulging out of their head and their face contorted into that hideous grin. In essence, he had killed them, but they were technically alive, just sitting there laughing and drooling, which in some ways I think is worse. In New Batman Adventures, particularly in the Holiday Nights special, you can see that the Joker did kill people with his gas. But yeah, I can see that was their intention, to be true to the comics, in that, the Joker kills them with his Joker toxin, but yeah, I don't think the censors allowed them to do that. True to his criminal roots, the Joker still wants to be the #1 crime boss in Gotham, but mixed with that is his insane need to confound Batman and the rest of Gotham with his outrageous black comedy crimes. To our way of thinking, the Joker's one motivating objective is not to do in the Batman. Oh, he will try to kill him, but only as a coup de grace to a particularly inspired crime. The Joker looks upon Batman as his greatest challenge, and he's not going to take out the Dark Knight in anything less than a grand and gruesomely funny style. Correct. Yes, 100%. I mean, that's the main crux of Mad Love. Later on, the Joker's getting very frustrated because he can't think of a clever way to defeat Batman, and it gets him down. The Joker is intelligent, theatrical, and in his own weird way, a showman. To him, if a crime isn't worth pulling off with panache, it isn't worth doing at all. It must also be noted that while the Joker is frightening and prone to psychotic, murderous mood swings, he is at times genuinely funny. Yep, that is pretty accurate, yes. His dialogue must be crisp and clever and completely free of the usual round of stale cartoon one-liners and bad puns. He's got a lightning-fast mind and should always be ready with a quip or a comical non sequitur as a given situation demands. Also, keep in mind that this guy is a clown, and writers should find ways to work visual gags, funny expressions, and the occasional element of the innocent, clown-like comedy into his persona. The fact that the Joker can instantly snap from a roguish, not unlikable mischief maker into a cold-blooded killer makes him an even more terrifying adversary. Now, broadly speaking, yes, this is accurate. This is what they did in the show. That first sentence there about his dialogue must be crisp and clever and completely free of the usual round of stale cartoon one-liners and bad puns. I would argue that was not the case for some of the early Joker episodes, like Christmas with the Joker, The Last Laugh, and Be a Clown. Once Paul Dini got involved, yes, they absolutely provided crisp and clever dialogue. But yeah, early on, I think they left something to be desired. And this early Bruce Timm drawing for the Joker, it's very... I can't remember the name of the guy whose art style led to Ren and Stimpy, but this Joker here on the right would not look out of place in Ren and Stimpy. It's really grotesque. I think it's the massive teeth, and maybe that really fierce brow as well, and the chin. It's much more caricatured than the final design. But yeah, you can see here this is like an early design for the Joker, and it's not. I mean, it's recognisably him, but it's not quite what we know. The teeth are much more jagged, and he's got kind of buck teeth. And it's that chin, I think. The face is really long and exaggerated. It reminds me of a Jim Aparo illustration, who drew Batman in like the 80s and the 90s. If you ever read Batman comics from then, you'd know Jim Aparo art. But yeah, let's move on. So we can see here that's the finalised design. And the eyes are a different shape. He doesn't actually have eyebrows here, does he? Whereas there he does have eyebrows. Let's go back at that one. That one doesn't really have eyebrows either, does it? But yeah, still, that's an early design there. And let's go on to the Penguin. So immediately you can see their original design for the Penguin here. Much more like the comic book one. Not at all like Danny DeVito in Batman Returns. So the Penguin, just from glancing at this first paragraph, I can see that there's a lot here that was never touched on in the show. Starting life as a sheltered, overprotected mama's boy, young Oswald Chesterfield Cobblepot was treated cruelly by the other kids in his neighbourhood. His short, round body, waddling gait and beak-like nose were easy targets for bullies, and they gave little Oswald the nickname Penguin. His only safe haven was his mother's exotic pet store, where he could spend time with his doting mother and the birds he loved. There's nothing in the animated series to suggest that this did not happen. The only thing I will say is that there's nothing to suggest that it did happen. And in the Batman animated book by Paul Dini and Chip Kidd, Paul Dini does say that they played around with the idea of him being a mama's boy, but dropped it in favour of, the Batman Returns look. When they weren't able to use the design they wanted to, I guess they just kind of gave in and said, no, all right, fine, we'll just go with Batman Returns and don't even mention it. I did a video about that, and if you're watching this, you've probably already seen it, but what did I call it? Something about how Batman the Animated Series wasted the Penguin. In essence, they did. I don't like being negative about my beloved show, but yeah, the Penguin's an area where they fell short a little bit, I think. But anyway, even there, peace was fleeting for Oswald. Though he was in his late 20s, he was still the object of scorn by local gang members. They jeered him for his funny looks, his obsessions with birds, opera, and classical literature, and, cruelest of all, for the fact he still lived at home with his mother. Yeah, well, try being a millennial, Oswald, Jesus Christ. Some people I know in their 30s still live with their parents, and, through no fault of their own, it's just you can't afford anything. But I suppose when would this have been? If he was in his 20s, so that would have been the 80s. Yeah, very, very different scenario. I lost my place now. This is why I don't usually stop in the middle of a paragraph, because then I lose my place. Worst of all, lived at home with his mother. That's right. The breaking point came when several members of the gang broke into the pet shop and destroyed the birds as a prank. Oswald's mother suffered a massive stroke when she discovered the atrocity, and her son was driven mad with grief. Deciding then and there to fight the punks with their own medicine, the Penguin used the shop's insurance money to hire his own gang and exacted his terrible revenge on the neighbourhood punks. With the local bullies crushed, the Penguin took over their neighbourhood shakedown operations and in no time parlayed it into one of the most profitable criminal gangs in Gotham. This is very similar to a Penguin origin story told in Secret Origin Special. I think it was written by Alan Grant, and I think it was called The Killing Peck. It is very similar to this, except rather than hiring a gang, the Penguin trained his body to get big and beefy, and he beat up the local bullies, and then they killed his birds in response, and he waited to get his revenge until years later. In our series, the Penguin will have his fingers in every illicit element of Gotham's underworld. Smuggling gangs, gambling, fencing rings. The evil bird will have a piece of it all. Still, he will be very careful to present himself as a gentleman to the city's upper crust. This is important for two reasons. The first being he actually considers himself to be a debonair, sophisticated man about town. He dresses in an old-style cutaway coat and top hat, a look which he at least considers high class. He is also fond of quoting classic writers, particularly Shakespeare, though to add a beat of comedy to his character, he will rarely get the quote right. The Penguin is more concerned with the appearance of being educated rather than actually getting his quotes right. The second reason the Penguin wants to pass himself off as a gentleman is that he doesn't want his mother to learn of his criminal misdeeds. Mrs. Cobblepot genuinely loves her son, and Penguin fears that if she ever knew the truth about him, it would kill her. So, yeah, none of that happened. We never saw the Penguin's family, presumably because they just went with the Batman Returns origin, in which he was cast away by his family and they were all deceased. But that could have been interesting. That point about wanting to maintain a veneer of class and social standing, that did come into play in the new Batman adventures when they no longer had to adhere to the Tim Burton films. So that's interesting. Though he is often seen in the company of beautiful women, usually rentals, that's a very subtle way of putting it, most human relationships mean nothing to the Penguin. People are troublesome but necessary objects to be bought, sold and discarded at his whim. Any affections he might have is reserved for his mother and his precious birds. Even as a child, the Penguin had an almost psychic bond with birds. Throughout his lonely teen years and into adulthood, birds were his only companion. They obeyed the young Cobblepot's every command, and when he started his career as the Penguin, he often used them in or as the object of his bizarre crimes. It should be noted that despite his pretensions to sophistication, the Penguin is legitimately acknowledged as one of the world's leading authorities on birds. In fact, he's written several highly acclaimed papers on ornithology during his various stretches in prison. When he's sent away for a crime, Penguin will tell his mother he's going on a lecturing tour for a while, or make up some other convenient bird-related excuse. I see. Okay, well, yeah, none of that was in the show. To be fair, there was nothing to contradict that he's an expert with birds with an almost psychic connection with them. I'm particularly thinking of I've Got Batman in My Basement, where the first time we see the Penguin, the first thing he does, he goes, "Wah!" and summons a vulture. Yeah, I wonder how he would have hidden his incarceration from his mother when, he's the subject of many headlines in Batman the Animated Series. But anyway, so Penguin's signature props are his trick umbrellas. He has a vast collection of baneful bumbershoots. Okay, I'd never heard of that word before. A baneful bumbershoot. That sounds like a euphemism. Each equipped with a deadly function. Some shoot bullets or knock out gas, while others deliver an electric shock or conceal a hidden blade. Penguin's most advanced umbrellas can be used as handheld helicopters for quick escapes. And of course, he has one or two designed for nothing more than keeping the rain off of him. Penguin's father died of pneumonia, and Mrs. Cobblepot has always been insistent that her little Oswald carry an umbrella with him whenever he goes out. Consequently, this has turned Penguin into something of a hypochondriac. Okay, so the broad array of umbrellas, yes, that's accurate. Hypochondriac, fear of hypothermia, no, that didn't ever come up. As far as Batman's concerned, the Penguin mainly wants to see him dead. There's little of an ongoing match of wits between the two adversaries, as there is between Batman and the Joker or the Riddler. Penguin considers Batman to be a muscle-headed nuisance. Not much different from the beefed-up goons who used to bully him when he was a kid. Therefore, Penguin tends to underestimate the Dark Knight's detective abilities, which trip him up every time. Yeah, I suppose so. So that's probably the first character in this Bible where there have been significant differences between what we see on the page and what we saw on screen. Penguin. So that's the final design, very much resembling the Danny DeVito Batman Returns look, with the long hair, the webbed hand and the bulbous round shape. This was their original design, where he was just like a tubby man with a big nose. Very much resembles the original comic book look. And then you can see this is... Let's turn that back. You can see this is the new design superimposed over... What was it? Well, it was this image, but that doesn't have a background, does it? But yeah. Okay, well that's interesting. Okay, next we have the Catwoman. Rich, glamorous, and stunningly beautiful is how the world of Gotham high society sees Selina Kyle. A darling of the jet set, Selina is apparently independently wealthy and is noted for giving large donations to animal protection organisations. Yes, that is correct. This one is accurate so far. What no one knows is that Selina Kyle leads a double life as the mysterious Catwoman, a shadowy figure that preys on the fortunes of Gotham's idle and corrupt rich. The same socialite Selina shares a glass of champagne with one night might find their private safe ransacked by Catwoman the next. Yep, that doesn't contradict anything from the animated series. Growing up poor on Gotham streets, Selina was forced to steal to live. By the time she was a young woman, she had become the city's most accomplished cat burglar and adopted a cat-like disguise to heighten the mystery around her already growing legend. They never really got into Selina Kyle's origins, but this doesn't contradict anything. Though she is a thief, the Catwoman does have her own code of honour. Remembering what it was like to grow up needy, she never steals from those who can't afford it. The rich, especially those who came by their money through criminal means, are fair game to her. She's a little like a modern-day Robin Hood, only instead of giving her loot to the poor, she keeps it for herself. Potentially, yeah. I don't recall Catwoman ever explaining why she had targeted someone. She literally just would see an object she wanted and go and steal it. When she did have episodes involving theft. Like Cat Scratch Fever didn't really involve stealing, it was about finding her cat. Catwalk, well, yeah, she did steal something for Scarface, but it wasn't, she wasn't targeting someone that she thought could afford to lose it. Catwoman's link with cats is just as strong as penguins with birds. She enjoys a special bond with felines, and all cats, tame or wild, instinctively trust her. Catwoman has several tigers and leopards of her own that she has liberated from wildlife smugglers, and will occasionally rely on their fangs and claws for extra defense. On her own, however, the Catwoman is nothing if not a formidable opponent. She carries a cat of nine tails whip with her at all times, and is an extraordinary athlete as well as a dangerous hand-to-hand combatant. So, she did not keep big cats. In fact, that was very much a thing for her. She wanted a sanctuary for them, rather than, I mean, they don't say that she kept them in her apartment, for God's sake, but, And there is a scene in The Cat and the Claw where a mountain lion comes along and pounces on Redclaw in defense of Catwoman, and she strokes it and it doesn't bite her hand off, so yeah. In our series, Catwoman's relationship to the Batman will be complex. There is an undeniable attraction between them, and they will occasionally find themselves working on the same case from different sides. Still, Catwoman is a criminal, and Batman will be torn between his feelings for her and his drive to see justice done. Also adding to Batman's conflict is that he and he alone will know who Catwoman really is. So, yes, Batman is torn in the show, but he always sides with justice. And by the end of The Cat and the Claw, he is not the only one that knows who Catwoman really is. So, not quite. Close, but not quite. There we go. So there's Catwoman designs. Within an episode, we'll see how Batman as Bruce Wayne secretly discovered Selina Kyle's double life, even though Selina has no idea Batman or Bruce Wayne knows her secret. Batman knows revealing her double identity would leave his in question as well. No. that did not happen. And you can see here an original design for Catwoman, or I should say an earlier design for Catwoman, where she had long flowing dark hair, so she's a bit more like the 1960s Catwoman. But yeah. Here's another design. Yes, there we go. So there's Catwoman ensnaring Batman. The Riddler. Okay, here we go. Years ago, young Eddie Nashton won a school prize by being first to figure out a complicated puzzle. It wasn't hard. The boy was curious, quick-witted, analytical, and even more important, he cheated. Flushed with his success, the boy went on to become an expert on solving puzzles, games, and riddles. In later years, Nashton changed his name to Enigma and billed himself as the Puzzle King. He made a fortune inventing puzzles and games and demonstrated them in one-to-one exhibitions across the country, but it all proved too tame for Enigma's quirky mind, and he decided to put his cunning to use by masterminding puzzle crimes on a grand scale. Police in every city were baffled by the chaotic crimes of the mysterious Riddler, but when Enigma hit Gotham, his very first scheme was deciphered and undone by Batman. As he was led away to jail, the Riddler swore that he'd someday engineer a riddle crime that even Batman couldn't figure out. So, big nope so far. That first paragraph about young Eddie Nashton, they never say anything to contradict this. I mean, I suppose they do say that his real name is Edward Nygma, N-Y-G-M-A, not N-I-G-M-A. But he was not, the Puzzle King. He was a game designer, and he didn't go around, making big puzzle-related crimes across America. That did not happen, so none of this is accurate so far. To date, the Riddler has yet to make good on his promise to devise a riddle clue that Batman hasn't been able to crack. Not that the Riddler is a total idiot. He's actually more than a match for anyone on the police force, but he's so psychologically fixated on the idea of stumping Batman that he can't commit a crime without leaving the Dark Knight some clue as to how he can be caught. Yeah, that's accurate. That's broadly correct. In the Riddler's Reform episode, he acknowledges this. He knows that he's going to get caught out one day, so he decided, well, that's it, I've just got to kill Batman and then I can give up being the Riddler. In our series, we'll be playing the Riddler as a sharp-witted mental genius whose cryptograms are light years away from the goofy gag-like riddles of the 60s TV show. He may decide to riddle Batman with an ancient quote a la the riddle of the Sphinx, or leave a clue in a way he rearranges objects on the table. Writers should challenge themselves to come up with the most interesting yet visual clues they can when thinking out a Riddler story. Now, this is very interesting because the Riddler famously was only used in 3 episodes. If You're So Smart, Why Aren't You Rich? What is Reality? And Riddler's Reform. And part of the reason for that is, in order to write Riddler episodes and convincing puzzles, you also need to be a very intelligent person. And I'm not saying that the writers weren't intelligent, but their puzzles and riddles were not their forte. And I think they would be the first to admit that. So, yeah, because they weren't able to write decent Riddler stories, or enough decent Riddler stories, they didn't use the character that much. It should also be noted that out of all of Batman's major adversaries, the Riddler is probably the one most likely to try to learn Batman's secret identity. Funnily enough, he didn't in the show. After all, a masked man is something of a riddle himself, which makes the idea of unmasking the Dark Knight all the more appealing to the Riddler. Enigma is not really bent on killing Batman. That's for more out-and-out vicious characters like the Penguin, and some others that we'll meet presently. The Riddler, even more so than the Joker, is obsessed with the idea of the ongoing chase between himself and Batman. For without Batman, what would the Riddler have left? He'd have to give up riddling completely, or move to Central City and match wits with that overhyped jogger. Yeah, and you can see a very early design for the Riddler here, where you can see the origins for his animated series look with the suit. I mean, the hat's different. I think they decided to move to a bowler hat. But he's not covered in like question marks or wearing a leotard like Frank Gorshin was. So they were very desperate to kind of get away from Frank Gorshin, which is a shame because Frank Gorshin was probably the best one in the 60s show. But anyway, moving on. My favourite, Two-Face. Easily the most tragic figure in Batman's rogues gallery is the grotesque creature now known as Two-Face. Originally, Harvey Dent was the most handsome and charismatic district attorney in Gotham City. He was a real crusader for justice and even consulted with Batman on key cases. Then, while tracing down a gangland boss on a lead supplied by Batman, Dent surprised the criminal and tried to subdue him himself. During the fight, the gangster threw a vat of acid into Dent's face. This permanently and hideously disfigured the left side of the DA's face, and when he saw the scars, Dent went hopelessly insane. No. I mean, it's partly correct. You know, Dent was handsome, charismatic district attorney, real crusader for justice. Consulted with Batman? No, he didn't. Not in the animated series. His relationship was with Bruce Wayne rather than Batman, so they changed that up. And obviously his fight with the gangster did not have result in acid being thrown in his face. He got blown up in Rupert Thorne's factory. And it wasn't the sight of his disfigured face that drove him insane. He was already mentally unwell. So our series will be unique in that we will show Harvey Dent not only as Two-Face, but in at least the first week's worth of episodes as Gotham City's justice-minded district attorney. Two-Face's story is too emotionally rich to do as one episode, and the tragedy of his condition will be made all the more real if we first meet him as Batman's closest ally in the Gotham legal system. In these stories, we will show the beginning of trust and friendship between the two men, all of which will be irrevocably destroyed along with Dent's face. He'll blame Batman for what happened to him, and will not rest until he's hunted down the Dark Knight and killed him. So the spirit of this was true, in that they do show Harvey Dent early on as Harvey Dent. But as I said earlier, the relationship is with Bruce Wayne rather than Batman. He's Bruce Wayne's friend. And I would say that Two-Face didn't blame Batman for what happened to him. Two-Face is very happy being Two-Face. When we see in Second Chance, when Harvey Dent tries to have the Two-Face personality erased, Two-Face kidnaps him, and he's furious about it. Two-Face is a separate person from Harvey Dent, essentially. With the loss of his face, Dent turned his back on law and order. Still, the crusading DA is not completely dead inside him. Two-Face always carries a two-headed silver dollar, one side pristine mint and the other side hacked up and scarred. A flip of the coin will decide if Two-Face will commit an act of good or evil. Now, this was something in the animated series that they didn't really play up very much. In Two-Face Part 2, he would flip his coin to decide whether they would, say for instance when he was robbing Rupert Thorne's bookies and they noticed that one of the employees had a massive diamond ring, he flipped the coin to decide whether they would steal it as well, and decided not to. because it wasn't part of his plan. But in other episodes, you don't really see Two-Face going, right, am I going to be good or am I going to be bad today? The coin was almost just like a prop that he would flip, almost anxiously in some ways. Well, Harvey Dent certainly flipped it anxiously. As a result of his accident, Two-Face became obsessed with the number 2. He has a psychotic attraction to anything in pairs or anything that even suggests a dual nature. He might rob a company on the 22nd floor on a high-rise, for example, or steal from a firm on Gemini Street. He'll go after any object in 2s, and in one planned story, after objects in 3, with the express purpose of destroying one of them. Two-Face's very unpredictability makes him one of Batman's most dangerous enemies. The funny thing is, a lot of the targets in Two-Face Part 2 were 2 themed. Like it was something on, there was the Gemini Club or something like that. But they were all businesses owned by Rupert Thorne, who was responsible for Two-Face's disfigurement. So the interesting thing there is, it seems like Rupert Thorne's the one with the thing for the number 2. Because he used, his lawyers were called like Doubleday or something. Yeah, they didn't really play up Two-Face targeting things related to 2 in the series. He was more of just like a general, I suppose, gangster. You know, he was trying to get rid of Commissioner Gordon and instill his own flunky in Gil Mason in the episode Shadow of the Bat. He was one of the bidders for Batman's secret identity and the strange secret of Bruce Wayne. And yeah, Second Chance. Well, yeah, he did set up 2 false clues to lead Batman away from the real perpetrator of the crime, which was him. That one's kind of a mixed result there as well. You can tell that this was written before Alan Burnett came on board, because Alan Burnett's idea for Two-Face was just sublime. Two-Face Part 1 is my favourite episode by far. Randy Rogel did a great job writing that episode, actually. And the second part. Part 2 is really good as well, but not quite on the same tier as Part 1. Anyway, so going on to the Scarecrow. Ex-college professor Jonathan Crane was obsessed with the use of fear to trigger obedience in test subjects. When one of his students died as a result of fear overdose, Crane was barred from ever holding another teaching position. Embittered and seeking revenge on the world at large, Crane dressed his loose-limbed form, in a macabre rags of a scarecrow and used his fear-inducing chemicals to force innocent people to bow to his will. Kind of, yes. So I guess the censors wouldn't allow them to have anyone die. But yes, he was a college professor who experimented on people and was kicked out of his position at Gotham University. True to his name, the Scarecrow has a scrawny, loose-limbed body and poses no physical threat to anyone. Yes, broad, yes. His real power is in his brain, and he's a master manipulator. Scarecrow's modus operandi is to discover what his victims' greatest fears are, then to use those fears against them. While never resorting to outright murder, the Scarecrow has incited riots and driven people to suicide. Once under his fear control, helpless victims will promise him anything: money, possessions, land, or total blind obedience. Yeah, this never really manifested. The Scarecrow had a more generic fear gas that would make people see what they were afraid of. So he gasses a security guard. Oh, there are spiders crawling all over me. Oh, well, he must have arachnophobia. Sprays Batman. Oh, my dad's coming out of me at the fire saying I'm a loser. He's afraid of disappointing his parents. Sprays Dr. Long, and he's got his bone hands. Oh, Dr. Long's afraid of death. Got it. Yeah, the Scarecrow in the animated series just seemed more interested in the pursuit of knowledge than anything else. Okay, so next we have Poison Ivy. When she was a child, homely Pamela Isley's only friends were the plants she tended to in her family's greenhouse. Then in high school, the shy girl blossomed into an attractive young woman and suddenly found herself beset with would-be boyfriends. Insecure Pamela was scared by the attention and withdrew even more. Then, one day, while she was working alone in the greenhouse, a gang of young toughs surprised and attacked her. During the struggle, some heat lamps shattered, sparking a fire. Pamela escaped, but she watched the greenhouse burn. She swore that she would find a way to use and humiliate all men for the way she was abused. Yeah, broadcasting standards and practices would not allow references to sexual assault, so no. Yeah, I can kind of see a reference to this sort of vaguely in the episode Pretty Poison when her greenhouse burns down. she kind of has a look on her face almost like, oh no, not again. It's like she's genuinely distraught seeing the flames tear through the greenhouse. But they never expressly went into her background, so this could potentially have happened, but probably not. After years of study, Pamela devised a love potion extracted from rare plants and used it to bend men to her will. Adopting the name Poison Ivy, the girl began a life of crime, taking wealthy men for all they had. In their first encounter, Ivy tried unsuccessfully to use her potion on the Batman, but he had already analysed traces of the potion from her other victims and had fortified himself with an antidote. Because Batman was the first man she couldn't seduce, Ivy developed a warped infatuation with him. Her goal is to enslave his heart by whatever means possible. No, that is not accurate. They went more with leaning into the eco-warrior concept. This is sort of close to the original 60s comics, where Poison Ivy's sole motivation is to seduce Batman, and become the most beautiful criminal in Gotham. But yeah. Poison Ivy has a unique metabolism which makes her body immune to all poisons. Consequently, she can handle virtually any toxin and frequently uses them in her crimes. Her own costume is cut to look like leaves of poison oak and ivy and coated with the noxious oils of those plants. This alone makes Poison Ivy a hard girl to hang on to. Yeah, sort of. She does talk about her unique metabolism in House and Garden. And her costume was streamlined to not have the leaves on it, because I guess that would be difficult to animate. But yeah, I mean, it's broadly right. Ra's al Ghul. Now, a master criminal with an international organisation, the mysterious Ra's al Ghul is bent on nothing less than complete worldwide control. His genius mentality rivals Batman's, and he is the only man to logically and deductively reason that the Dark Knight and Bruce Wayne are one and the same. Correct. Though seeming to be a remarkably well-conditioned man in his mid-50s, Ghul is decades, perhaps centuries older. Yeah, I think he says he's 600 years old at one point. Thanks to the Lazarus Pit, a mixture of exotic mystical chemicals, Ghul's followers have brought their leader back from the dead countless times. Ghul says he can never rest until his dream of a perfect world is realised, a world without hunger, disease and fear, and also a world that recognises him as absolute master. The fact that he frequently uses extortion, terrorism and murder to accomplish his goals is irrelevant to Ghul. The vision of his perfect world must be maintained at all costs, and if some people get crushed in the process, he believes it's a small price to pay. Broadly, yes, that's pretty accurate to how he appeared in both the comics and the show. Despite his ruthlessness, Ra's al Ghul does have a strong sense of honour where Batman is concerned. Ghul looks upon the Dark Knight as his ultimate challenge, and perhaps a someday successor to his global empire if he can be turned to his will. Yes, correct. Towards this end, Ghul has stacked the odds in his favour by making his beautiful daughter Talia part of his schemes to ensnare Batman. Like her father, Talia is a brilliant tactician and masterful warrior. There is a great deal of heat between her and Batman, but her father's villainous dealings have always tainted the relationship in Batman's mind. Still, neither Ra's nor Talia have admitted defeat yet, and they hope to eventually sway him to their side. Yeah, this is probably like the most accurate description of a villain we've come across so far. They didn't really steer very far from the comics, so in both this description and the show. So yeah, and there's a look at some early designs. Talia's outfit was less sort of 70s Bond girl, if I remember rightly, although she did kind of wear almost like a nightgown through many of her appearances. But yeah, anyway, moving on. Mr. Freeze. Now this one's going to be fun. Once a shifty cryogenics expert running a body freezing scam, Mr. Freeze eluded the police in his lab only to be found out by Batman. The two fought and Freeze was knocked into a cryogenic chamber where he was frozen in a near-death state. After he was revived, he discovered he could only live in sub-zero temperatures and vowed to make Batman pay for what happened to him. No. Mr. Freeze wears a special constructed helmet and suit that preserves his body at 50 degrees below zero. He also carries a cold gun that can instantly freeze people or turn metal so brittle that it shatters on impact. Because of his freezing death and revival, Freeze considers himself to be emotionally cold, rather like a walking corpse. He cares nothing for innocents who may get hurt by his crimes. or by the hoods he employs to carry out his schemes. All human feeling has been frozen out in him. Now, that actually is true in Heart of Ice. That's what he considers himself to be. But he is actually a very emotional person. Really, the person who has a heart of ice in that episode is Ferris Boyle, not Victor Fries. All of Freeze's crimes are cold or snow related, which would make him a great villain for a wintertime setting. Also, a team up between Mr. Freeze and the Penguin might lead to some interesting possibilities. No, Mr. Freeze didn't really commit crimes. Well, I suppose he did. He stole stuff from Gothcorp, didn't he, to create his big freeze cannon. But I was going to say that his crimes weren't motivated by greed. They were a means to his ends. So if he needed something and he didn't have it, he'd just go and get it. It's not like he was stealing diamonds because he thinks diamonds are pretty, you know. Everything was done in revenge of his wife's death, or apparent death. Alright, here we go. Other characters. So you can see here they've got a list of characters they want to use, but they haven't really given them a lot of thought. So these are by no means the only villains in Batman's Rogues Gallery. We encourage prospective writers to consult the Batman comic book for other colourful criminals that might trigger an interesting story. Some likely candidates include the Ventriloquist, a seemingly mild-mannered criminal who gives orders through his ruthless, tough-talking dummy Scarface. Correct, yes. The interesting thing about the Ventriloquist is that he first appeared in, I want to say 1988, might have been... No, I'm pretty sure it was 88. So he was a relatively recent creation at the time, but they embraced him. They did not embrace other recent creations, like Bane, for instance, but yeah, Ventriloquist and Scarface, that was... Yeah, he was used quite well in the show. Calendar Man, a thief who stages his crimes around calendar gimmicks, days of the week, zodiac signs, holidays, etc. He did not get used. Dr. Hugo Strange, a brilliant but warped scientist who mutates his patients into brutish, simple-minded giants. That character was used once in the cartoon, and he appeared in Batman Adventures, the comic book tie-in, and he's currently appearing in Batman Adventures Continue, written by Paul Dini and Alan Burnett. But he does not mutate his patients into brutish, simple-minded giants. Oh, and he also appeared in Justice League Unlimited, didn't he, as part of Cadmus, I think? Yeah, I've recall seeing Hugo Strange adjusting his glasses, reading some paper. Next, Clayface, a former small-time criminal who, thanks to a secret elixir, can duplicate anyone's face. Oh boy, they really go quite far away from that. The Mad Hatter, a psychotic genius who commits crimes based on Lewis Carroll's Wonderland theme and controls people's minds via mechanisms built into hats. Not quite. No, not quite. I mean, psychotic genius, yes, commits crimes based on Lewis Carroll's Wonderland. Well, not really. I mean, after Mad as a Hatter, we don't really touch upon Lewis Carroll's Wonderland theme very much. I'm thinking of the Worry Men, where he uses little South American Worry Men dolls, and Perchance to Dream, where there's nothing Alice in Wonderland themed in that episode. And also he controls people's minds via mechanisms built into hats. Yeah, they kind of drop that as well. In that, okay, he would put his mind control cards in people's hats, or in hats that he would place on people's heads. But as I said a moment ago, he uses other means to control people later on, like the Worry Men dolls. Killer Croc, an incredibly strong reptile man complete with bulletproof alligator-like skin, razor-sharp teeth and claws. He is the ruler of the Gotham City sewers. Sort of, yeah. He wasn't really the ruler of the Gotham City sewers. That honor belongs to the Sewer King. Damn it. Respect the Sewer King. Man-Bat, originally a dedicated zoologist, Carl Langstrom tested an experimental serum made for bat's blood on himself and transformed into a rampaging half-man, half-bat monster. Though Batman found a temporary antidote, Langstrom can never be sure when he might become the vicious Man-Bat again. Well, they got his name wrong. It's Kurt Langstrom. And yeah, he did use the serum on himself, but it's a temporary change, isn't it? The reason the Man-Bat goes on his crimes in On Leather Wings is to get more chemicals needed to make the change more permanent, and it's almost like a separate entity. It's basically a big metaphor for addiction. And also Batman's antidote seemed to work on Langstrom, as we saw in Terror in the Sky. The Gentleman Ghost. No one, even Batman, is sure if this semi-invisible, elegantly dressed wraith is a real ghost or not. Still, the being known as Gentleman Ghost has used his powers of dematerialization and levitation to confound the Gotham police on several occasions. He did not appear in Batman the Animated Series. He was in Batman Brave and the Bold, but no, he was not in the animated series. Writers should keep in mind that while we can use any of Batman's fantastic array of villains, our series should not be limited to the freak of the day. The classic villains can trigger some great ideas, but don't rule out gangsters, crooked politicians, locked door mysteries, or the occasional technological threat to spark a story. That is correct, yes. They certainly... I mean, there was an element of villain of the week, but there were some stories that had no villains at all, like... or I should say no costume supervillains at all, like Appointment in Crime Alley or It's Never Too Late. Okay, so then it's on to the episode premises. Now, I've been going... This recording is nearly an hour long. I'm going to edit it down so it will be less. And I'll be back for a final part looking at the premises for the episodes and looking at some of the artwork included. So, yeah, take care. Thank you for watching. All the best. Goodbye.